So Dr. Shuman, the first question, could you describe for me a little bit about what Associates in Periodontics is, as far as the services you provide, the number of staff that you have, the number of patients, and
Sure.
that sort of thing about the practice?
Sure. Well, Associates in Periodontics has been around for 40 years. Started by Dr. Paul Levi, my senior partner. And we were at 247 Pearl Street in Burlington for all 40 years until the building burned down on Labor Day of 2011. We're a periodontal office, which is basically treating gum disease, and also we place dental implants. And I'm also a consultant up at the Fletcher Allen Hospital, where I'm the dental consultant for placement of oral appliances to treat sleep apnea and snoring. We have about 4,500 patients. There's 4 doctors. 2 of us are full-time and 2 of us are part-time. And I have about 26 employees because we have, or had, the office in Burlington and also an office down in Barre, Vermont. Where we are now is the temporary facility that I built after the fire. This was an empty space at that time that I found about 4 to 6 weeks after the fire. Was able to locate this space and start getting it fit up to get back to work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And are you the largest practice in the area that specializes in periodontics?
We are the largest periodontal specialty practice, that's true, with 4 docs in it. There are some large oral surgical practices in addition, but as to the respect of pure periodontics, yes, we are the largest in Vermont.
Okay. So walk me through what happened. There was a fire, and can you tell me not only what happened during the fire, but what happened after the fire?
Sure. Let me give you some details. It was a holiday weekend, and we were up at camp in Lake Carmi. Came back on Monday night and got home around 6:30 at night, and just catching up on emails and all that sort of thing. And I got a phone call from one of my staff, Kim, saying, "Have you heard anything?" To which I responded, "What?" She says, "My neighbor, who happened to be a patient of ours, was a scanner buff, and she was listening to her police scanner, and she heard that 247 Pearl Street was on fire." I said, "No, I hadn't heard that, but I will obviously get in the car and get down there right away." Interestingly enough, about 1 minute later, another one of my staff called me and said, "The building's on fire." And I said, "Well, calm down. We don't have any confirmation. I'll get in the car and go down there and see what's going on." This was about 8:30. I was in immediate denial, of course, because on July 4th, actually, of the summer of 2011, we had a fire at 247 Pearl, but it was in the dumpster. Somebody had lit some firecrackers off, thrown them in the dumpster, and there was a dumpster fire. So all this didn't feel great. I still had the optimism that, okay, it's just another dumpster fire, building can't be on fire, don't worry about it. So I piled into the car with my wife and my 11-year-old daughter, and we headed down. I live in South Burlington, so it wasn't a long jaunt. And when we crested the hill on Pearl Street and we're coming down, that's when I knew there was trouble because the road was, barricades were up, police were out, you could see flashing lights all the way down Pearl Street, and they stopped us and wouldn't let us go down, continue on our journey down the road. So I got out of the car and said, "Look, I'm the owner of the building that seems to be on fire here, and I might be able to help the firemen and so forth with locating things and knowing where things are." And she said, "Well, you're not allowed to go down. I'll have to call my supervisor." So I wasn't going to wait around. I just got off Pearl Street, walked down one of the side roads, and came out the back way and ended up right across the street at the pharmacy and the liquor store. And sure enough, I found the chief of the fire chief, and told him who I was, and he asked me to stay there and did consult with me about the building and what's going on and so forth. So it was on fire right then and there, and pretty much I was in denial there too. I remember thinking clearly that, okay, they'll put it out, we'll be fine, we'll just replace some walls, we'll be back to work in a week. And then about an hour later, when the flames shot out the roof, I knew we were in trouble. And actually, the fire chief, at one point in time, a little after that, it's like every fire truck blared their, whatever it is, their horns, and all the firemen came out of the building. And I remember asking him, what's going on now? He goes, it's over. We're going into defensive mode now. We've lost. He was very, very upset. I mean, the firemen were emotionally upset about it because they're not used to losing. He says, one of the floors collapsed. It's now dangerous to be in there, and everybody's out. The hook and ladders were all up on the roof, and 3 of them just pouring water down into the thing. And they were in defensive mode just to make sure it didn't spread to the neighborhoods. That was about 11 o'clock. By that time, all my staff was there behind me. We were all sort of huddled together, watching. It's an interesting feeling watching your 28 years of your life sort of burn to the ground. I remember thinking at about 11 o'clock with all my staff there that we need to contact everybody who's supposed to be coming in tomorrow and let them know that we're not here. And I was thinking, how in the world are we going to do that? We don't even know who was coming in tomorrow. So I spoke to Kim, my front desk person, and said, do you happen to have a day sheet that you brought home over the weekend that has names on it? We can look up everybody's phone number. And she did. She generally would take home a printed day sheet, even though our schedule was all electronic on the computer. We didn't have access to our server. So fortunately, we had a paper copy of the schedule, and were able to get the names from there. And then we realized that we also have a service that calls patients or sends them an email or sends them a text, whatever it is that they prefer, however they like to communicate with us. And they will confirm appointments for us. We have that service. So they usually collect data from the schedule about 2 weeks ahead. So we were pretty certain that they would have 2 weeks of data for patients and allow us to get the phone numbers, know who was coming in, and be able to contact them. So at about 11 at night, I told just a core group of my crew that to be at my house at 9 in the morning, and we will start calling these patients, get that list from the Sesame, which is the company that does that service for us, because the first thing we need to do is cancel patients for at least a week. And I remember telling them the next morning, don't use the word cancel. I said, I don't want to have any feeling of finality here. Use the word postpone, that we need to postpone your appointment. We don't know, we have no clue as to how long, but we will be back in touch and we will rearrange the appointments. So really that was the first thing that came to mind and that we did. The second, of course, was to find a place to meet, and conveniently that was my house. We had no space to go to. And then the third was we needed to set up some phone systems and then get back into our computer system. Fortunately, with cell phones, we had access to make calls, plus the phone from my house. So everybody had their own individual cell phone. I had my cell phone, and we had 3 people plus my main line being used to call everybody and let them know that we won't be in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So the goal was just to get 1 week of patients out there knowing that we had to postpone their appointment, and give us a chance to sort of catch our breath and figure out, okay, what's next, and give me time to contact the insurance companies and sort of put together a plan as to where we're going to go from here. And of course, all the staff want to know what they can do and how they can help and what's going on. And at that time, I couldn't have 20 people just coming to my house and figuring out what to do, because we didn't really know what the next step was. Mm-hmm. So I kept it as a core group for that week. We had a nice whiteboard and we started outlining our plans of what we need to do. And off to the races we went.
How did you make out with the computer? Were all of your records computerized before the fire?
That's a really good question. And an interesting story. We were about 80% electronic at the time, meaning if you had come to see me, any x-rays that I would have taken were digital x-rays, Any chartings that we would have done were also digital. What we didn't have was the paper records, of course, where if you said to me, Brian, what did you tell me last time you saw me? I didn't have that information. That's on paper. So we needed to get the backup going and get our server back on. Plus, we had our satellite office in Barrie that hooked into the server. And they ran the schedule and everything off of the server. So it was pretty critical to get back up and running. We have a rule in my office that's pretty critical, and that is no one ever leaves without the backup. And at the time we were using a tape backup, and I had a redundancy in that backup, and that I also backed up to the cloud, whatever the cloud is, that we had that service. So that was the next thing I asked was, who has the backup from Friday? Because I teach on Fridays and I wasn't there. And sure enough, we had it. We had the tape. So that was an incredible sigh of relief. Knowing we had the backup, knowing that I had insurance coverage, which turned out to be somewhat of a disaster, and still is, but we had a backup. So I got in touch with my IT company, the tech group out in Williston, and said, we have the tape and we need to be back up and running. And they said, no problem. We'll get you up and running in no time on a virtual server. That shouldn't be a problem. Do you have your software? I said, which software? That's not on the tape? They said, no, your software is not on the tape. That's a data backup. You need your dental software. Do you have a copy of that? And I was like, yeah, in the building that just burned down. So I said, well, you're gonna have to get in touch with Kodak and have them either send it, over the cloud or send you a disk. Said, okay, and any other software that you need to run, our accounting software and our imaging software, all the softwares, we didn't have them. We had a data backup. Because the full backup, we didn't do a full backup every day. We would do that once a week. So, pulling stuff off of that, we still needed more than what we had. So anyway, it was interesting because I said, well, forget the cloud, I've got the tape. Go ahead and let's at least going on that as soon as we get the Kodak dental software. And as soon as I gave them the tape, they said, it was about 3 years old that I had this tape backup system. I said, they don't make this anymore. Technology changes so swiftly that they didn't have access to a tape drive to run our tape. So I was like, well, we got to be able to get one somewhere. And so we ended up going on eBay and overnighting a tape drive that would take my cartridge so that we could put the data back into the system. So I said, well, now I'm going to call the cloud and say, well, whichever comes first, we're going to get back online. So back to you get what you pay for. The cloud service wasn't what I had anticipated. I guess I hadn't purchased the overnight version, and they told me it would take a few days for them to download all the data, because we had a lot of images, and to put that onto a disk and send it to us. So I said, well, just get going and do it. And sure enough, about 4 days later, it came. And I just wanted to run a check with that one and also on the tape drive that we had to make sure that the amount of gigabytes of information was the same and that sort of thing. But the drive, the disk they sent us was filled with errors. It was just filled with errors, and my IT people said, we can't even use this disk. So we're using the tape anyway. But I called the company up and said, it's filled with errors. What are you doing? They said, oh, well, we'll do another then. And I'm like, 4 more days, you're going to do another, and it's probably going to be filled with errors again anyway. So that was hugely disappointing, that here I thought I was doing the right thing, backing up to the cloud, like they tell you to do, having redundancy. And if I hadn't had that tape, I would have been in some trouble. Good news is we recovered all of our data. All of the electronic data that we had was there, and we were back virtualized in just a few days on a virtual server so that the Barrie office could hook in. And now we could start to hook in as well up here in Burlington. Now the problem is I didn't have computers. Now, one, everybody's still in my house. Every day we had a meeting at 9 o'clock, but I only have 3 computers only. I have 3 computers at my house, And we had some people bring in laptops, and we started accessing this virtual server. But even that was slow and difficult, and with everybody in one room and the echoing, and it was a very difficult thing. We needed to find our own space. We also needed to hook up phones, and Sovereignnet was great, and they were literally there the next day and gave us 2 internet phones. I had a modem with a couple of extra ports on it, and we got our number ported over, so that worked out well, although the quality wasn't so great, so it was still difficult. But at least we could get incoming calls now of patients that were calling, and we could get the messages and do everything we needed to do. Did that answer the question? Because I kind of forgot what it was.
So the 20% that was not computerized was permanently lost?
No, it wasn't. What's interesting about the paper records was that the building burned down, but our records were in metal cases, and they're pretty close together. And just like if you take a whole newspaper and wrap it up tight and throw it in the fire, it doesn't ignite. It just sort of smolders. And there was mostly in the building water damage. The fire came up that way, but it just singed the fronts. And I'd gone in there later on and looked, believe it or not, and I could see that the records were still there. Now, records that might have been on desks and so forth, they were gone. But the majority of our records were all packed in these files. So we did the research, we got involved with the HIPAA regulations and so forth, and companies that were HIPAA qualified. SecureShred was one of them. And we got together with a demo company, and they signed all these releases and so forth. And we ended up taking part of the parking lot and placing police tape and so forth there. And SecureShred came in, and when they started demoing the building and we could watch them and know they were close to the chart room, the picker, and these guys are amazing. I mean, they were picking up pieces of brass piping, one at a time with this huge claw. They knew that they needed to grab these charts, pluck them out, and put them over into this place that we not only had wrapped off with the police tape, but also a 24-hour guard, so that we had everything HIPAA compliant. And it was all soaked, but we packed that all into the truck, and then that got shipped off. It got dried. They can freeze dry things to stop the mold. And then they started to peel the pages apart that we wanted, and we had given them a sample chart and said, these are the pages we would like if they're still available. They dried them, they copied them, they then sent them over to SecureShred, I believe it was, who then ran them and digitized them and sent them to us, and even 6 months later we're still sending us some on discs. And now we have that information in a digital form, and since we're now completely electronic record, we're downloading that information as needed into the patient's records. So we still lost some information from way back when, because we didn't really I didn't need the information from 1985. We just sort of wanted that last page. And the other thing that we're fortunate, being a periodontal office, is that most of our patients are referred in. So anything I would do for you, if I saw you today and did an exam and x-rays, all of that information gets shipped out to your dentist. Mm-hmm. So we had a double backup. We not only had the electronic backup with the tape and also the cloud, but I had backups at every general dental office in the state because we're just helping. You don't necessarily become our patient. Mm-hmm. So we had that backup too if we needed more information.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So I'm just going to tighten up this shot a little bit more just to give a little more variety here.
Now, just as a quick follow-up, mm-hmm. Once that all happened, I went to my IT guys and said, I want to know how, if this ever happens again, you can get me up and running in 1 hour. I want to know how much it costs. I might choose to do it in 2 days. That may be my choice. But I want to know what's it going to take to be up and running in 1 hour. And that's where we are today.
So today you'd be, if this happened again, you'd be able to recover that quickly?
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, so we now, I hate to say back up to the cloud again, but we now back up to the tech vault over at the tech group is one thing that I have. We have a NAS on site that's backed up every 15 minutes or so, and I have another unit that is the cloud backup, but if they needed to, if we really couldn't get it all back together and we lost that unit in the fire as well, that can be shipped out to me as well. And that takes snapshots every every 15 minutes.
Well, that sounds like a terrific system. How expensive is that? Is that
Surprisingly, not that expensive. I'll give you the exact numbers. The unit that takes these snapshots is, we have a 500 gigabyte unit. You can get a terabyte, but we got a 500 gigabyte, which is about right for us. That cost me about $2,000, and to back up to the cloud is costing me about $300 a month. The tech group is a little more expensive than that, and their full backups that we send over there runs about $600 a month. So I have redundancy there. Plus, we have whatever we want to do locally. We can still back up to a USB drive and take that home with us, although there's some HIPAA issues that go along with that. So we don't do that anymore. But we also have that NAS unit, which is a backup in addition.
and it sounds like it's worth it.
I'm telling you one thing. You know, you want to pay as little as you have to get what you need, obviously. But we're dead in the water without this information. And as we all go to this electronic medical record, and I think it's standard that we all have to do it, medical and dental by 2014, if we don't back these things up correctly, then it's an unbelievable disservice to our patients, to our practices, and I can't think of anything worse from my practice perspective than having a tragedy like this, and then on top of it being told, and you've lost everything. You have no data. I don't know how you could even react to that. So we have to get the word out how critical it is to not just have one backup, you know, because sometimes you think, well, I'll take this home and we're fine. There has to be redundancy, and we need to have systems that are proven to work, and even those I don't trust. So even right now, we've been back in practice since January 16th of 2012, so 6-7 months, whatever it is. Even now, I have the 2 off-site backups. You know, I haven't had the guts to say, okay, I don't need one anymore. This one has proven to me that it works, and I feel really safe with it. I just don't feel that way right now. And hopefully, maybe at some point in time I will, but it's well worth the dollars spent to have that peace of mind. Mm-hmm. Totally.
Okay. So what other types of advice can you offer to the clinical practices regarding disaster recovery and business continuity?
I guess my first and most important tip, if that's how we want to call it, is, and I didn't mention this earlier, other than the data, the other most critical part of practicing is my staff. People come here, yes, to see me and to see the doctors, and that's great, and we love them, and we got wonderful relationships with our patients, but relationships develop with the staff. And to replace a staff member is not only timely, costly, doesn't always work, and to have people here, and most of my people have been here on average of at least 15 years, if not longer. We have some staff that have been here for 30 plus years. People come and they stay. And so, to backtrack that, the most critical thing I would say is business interruption coverage. I pay living wages to all my staff. You know, they make very nice salaries. But the reality is, many of us live paycheck to paycheck, or month to month. They count on me to continue their salary. On day one, I sent out a blast email to everybody in my office assuring them that their salaries would be paid. That you do not need to go on unemployment, that I will be paying salaries. I took a loan against my home. You know, I can do that, amen. Because insurance wasn't paying right away, that's for sure. But I know that they had to live, and as distraught as I was, losing the building, seeing everything happen that happened, I know that one of the very early thoughts going through their heads, it had to be, oh my God, we have a mortgage payment due in 2 weeks, and I need my paycheck to do that. Or, you know, the bills that would pile up. So the stress must have been unbelievable for them, and I hope that when I came out with that quickly, that they at least could breathe a sigh of relief and say, we're going to be okay. And I did. I paid everybody, whether they worked or not, for the first for the 4 months that we were out. Now, I had hoped and anticipated that business interruption was going to help me with that. 9 months later, I'm still in arbitration trying to get those dollars to at least help somewhat with what I did, and I would do it again regardless. But I purchased business interruption specifically knowing that that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to help me pay my staff and allow me to keep my staff. And although it hasn't completely happened yet, I still have the utmost confidence that if I wait long enough and fight hard enough, it will occur. And I can let you know in probably another month because we're coming to the end where we should have that determination made. So that's so critical. Business interruption, unless you tell me you can live without your staff, and if you say, no, I don't need my staff, okay, then maybe you don't need it. But for me, that is critical, and when I speak with dentists and so forth, that is the number one issue, number one tip. Second, other than business interruption, would be you're underinsured. I can, at least in the dental community, I can almost guarantee that everybody's underinsured. I have not met one dentist who's had a disaster, and we've had a number of them. We've had my fire, we've had a fire down in Stowe, we've had floods, and I've talked to all of them. Not one of us was properly insured for contents. Unbelievable. And I'm 56 years old. Trust me that spending money from my savings and so forth to rebuild my practice was not part of my retirement plans. It is not cheap to build a dental practice. To give you a feel, you're looking at about $1.7 million to put my practice back together, soup to nuts. I was not covered for that much, that's for sure. And so a large portion's coming out of my pocket. But it is what it is. Agents don't tell you how much to insure for. They don't know how much dental offices should insure for. And they don't want to tell you because if they're wrong, they don't want to get sued. I understand that. We need to know. And what happens is you meet with your agent for 15 minutes in between patients, and they say, well, how much coverage do you want this year? And you think about, well, what's it take to replace the equipment I have in this room? And you come up with a per-operatory number, and you go with it. And then, God forbid, something happens like happened to us where you lose everything. And replacing this operatory turns out to be half the cost of what it takes to replace the whole office. The fit up alone, what I mean fit up is the walls, the plumbing, that's it. It's $300,000. So if you have $500,000 worth of coverage, you got nothing. I have lasers that cost $100,000. So I can walk away with fit up and 2 lasers and I've got nothing. So for myself, I'm coming up with a document for the dental community that shares my experience, that will share my real costs to say, this is what it costs me. If you don't want to insure for that much, fine. That's okay, as long as you're doing that with an informed consent in a way that, okay, I'm willing to take the risk that my place won't burn to the ground like Brian's did, and I'm going to only insure for half. But at least know what the number is around, ballpark figure, of what it really takes. We don't know that, but we do now, because I've already talked to the insurance companies, and that's my one goal, is to get that word out there. So that would be the second big tip. And can you hold it here for a second?
Sure.
You can just cut this out, because there was one more. Oh yeah, there it is. This is why I don't remember it. Okay, my third tip. Be prepared for the stress of your life. Now, it's interesting, people say, well, nobody died, and that's true. I mean, thank God. Nobody died, nobody got hurt in the fire. But once you put that to the side, this is a very stressful event. And I remember thinking, you know what? I have insurance. That should be easy. It turned out, for me, and this may not be for everybody, that the stress of dealing with the insurance company, especially when I was so naive to think that these people were there to help me, and I appreciate that that sounds negative, and I'm generally a very optimistic and positive person, but I'm relating to you my own experience, not necessarily an experience that other people have had, although I haven't met many that have had good experiences. They have pushed and pushed and pushed. And the sad part is that they're allowed to. They wrote the regulations. They wrote the rules. They didn't ask me for input. They wrote them to their advantage. And in the first 2 months, when they were asking me the most absurd questions I could ever imagine, ridiculous questions like, it appears that your building didn't have an attic. And when you've been in a building for 28 years and you stored all the stuff in the attic, and now the experts on their side are saying, well, prove to us that you had an attic, you're incredulous. It got so bad that I had 35 computers, which was a big practice. We had 35 computers that we lost, a couple of servers, which they didn't believe either. I had to go back and get all old receipts for 10 years to prove that. And I replaced my server right away. As I said earlier, you got to replace the server. So we got that up and running. And once we got the server up and running, of course I sent in to say, here's the server and so forth. 6 months later, we're still fighting. We're still fighting over how much square footage we lost. They would not agree to the square footage listed in the records in Burlington. The tax records and 2 other architects that had independently looked at the building years before, they wouldn't agree to it. They said, no, we think it's 2,000 square feet less. We don't think you had an attic. And then worse, they actually called me, wrote to me, and I have it in email, I've saved it, because we replaced this, I got a server and got up and running. They wrote to me and said, we would like the part number of the fan that's in your server, because we think you might have upgraded. And we also want the part number of the gigabyte of RAM that's in there. And I remember thinking how earlier I would have probably gone off the deep end with that kind of request. We're talking a $60 fan, and I don't know, gigabyte of RAM today is what, 40 bucks, something like this? I mean, I lost 35 computers, screens, 2 servers, and they want the part number for a fan. And I had to sit back and say, absolutely. If this will help my claim come to fruition, I will get you those part numbers. And then I hang up the phone thinking, this is just a game. They're just trying to push me, because they don't give a hoot what the part number is for a fan, but they're allowed to ask for it, and I need to give them that information. But after 6 months on a rather large claim asking about $60 parts, it was frustrating. But you need to expect that. At least I learned to expect it. And although you get down once in a while, you gotta wait. You cannot let them push you over the brink and just say, I'm done. Give me something and I'm out of here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you, do you now have any sort of disaster recovery plan, or I take it you didn't have one before?
We didn't have a written, oh God, we didn't have any disaster recovery. And I've been on boards, for Delta Dental, and they have disaster recovery plans, but you sit back and say, I'm a small business, I don't need this. One, this is never going to happen to me. Well, there's one myth right there. 2, who's going to take the time to do a disaster recovery plan? 3, right now for me, the disaster recovery plan is right here. It's pretty fresh in my mind. But I've been working with Massachusetts to come up with forms and so forth to use, and also Vital, VITL, have informed me that they have specific forms as well to help with that kind of issue. And those are the kinds of things we're also presenting to our dental community. So we now have that in place, but still, even with a piece of paper, it's brutal. It's brutal. And the real key is have electronic records, have adequate coverage. If I had known I had adequate coverage, I probably would have taken a vacation. I probably would. And people said, oh, you're playing golf? I mean, it was 24/7 trying to put offices back together, and also trying to meet within some budget because I was underinsured. I mean, that's not a good feeling. So, have the right coverage so that takes some of the stress out of it. Know that they're going to give you a hard time, or at least some companies will give you a hard time, and you have to be prepared for that. Have an inventory ready to go, because if you don't have an inventory, they think that, and rightfully so, they say, well, you're just making that up. You probably didn't have that. Honesty isn't an issue with them. Whatever, it's not, they don't trust you. They don't trust what you say. They question your integrity. And maybe they have a right to do that, but it's a lousy feeling. It's a lousy feeling. When I know I lost 35 computers and they tell me I lost 12, that's a bad feeling. You know, go prove it to us. Not good. But we're well on our way now, so anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, I probably have tons and thousands of things.
Those are the big ones.
I think let me see if I make sure I got the big ones. You know, another important issue I didn't mention was right away we had to establish communication, some sort of communication with the staff, because I couldn't write letters to everybody. I couldn't call everybody. So that's where email came in, and I kept a diary, so to speak. I would send out updates. I have updates for like the first 3 days. I have a whole diary of like 21 updates. And so the rule was you checked your email in the morning, you checked it in the evening, twice a day, period. And you responded. Even if it had nothing to do with you, everybody had to respond with, I got it. And so everybody felt in the loop. And that was a very positive thing for all of us for me to know that I could get in touch with everybody and they could get whatever information that I think they needed to know. And I think it gave them some comfort that they were still involved and were in the loop, so to speak. So that was pretty critical. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you.